Hi friends, welcome back to another video, or welcome if this is your first time here. My name is Ahya and I have a really exciting video for you all today. I'm so excited to film this video for you all. It's a spring and cottagecore book recommendations video, and it's not just that, but I also get to show you some beautiful pieces of clothing that Simple Retro were kind enough to send me. Simple Retro is a brand that I have followed for many years now, and I've always admired their vintage inspired clothing. I particularly fell in love with their dresses a few years ago when I first came across their profile on Instagram. So when they reached out wanting to collaborate with me, I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked. I was so over the moon that they had seen my stuff and wanted to work together. And so today I have the honor of showing you 3 different pieces of clothing. The first one, I'll put my tea down. The first dress that I have is the one that I'm wearing right now, and this is the Thea Rose polka dot dress, and it's the v-neck with some cute puff sleeves. And I love a good puff sleeve, but I love that this one is not too puffy so that I can wear a cozy cardigan on top of it without any like extra fabric getting in the way. Knowing me, I will probably wear this dress with a cozy knit cardigan or a jumper on top of it. That's just how I like to wear dresses. It makes me feel really cozy and comfortable, and so I can't wait to wear this every spring and summer season. This next piece, oh, it's so pretty. It's so beautiful. I can't get enough of it. This is the Annie charming floral dress, and it's this gorgeous red floral dress with beautiful cinched, again slightly puffy sleeves, not too puffy but enough, very dainty and very pretty. And I'm obsessed with this lace collar detailing. This is the first red piece of clothing that I own in my wardrobe. I don't really have very many colourful pieces in general, so I can't wait to be able to have a pop of colour, and with this gorgeous floral print on it, it makes it super elegant. I just love it so much and I can't wait to wear this. And last but not least, I have this gorgeous blouse. This is the Delaney Rose embroidered blouse, and oh, I'm so chuffed with this piece. It's so well made. It's got the most beautiful lace detailing. The cuffs have lace detailing too, and this wonderful light blue silk embroidered right in the middle there, and it just gives such a beautiful touch to it. This is like the most cottagecore like blouse ever. I love it so much. What I really love is that at the back there's this piece of string that you can tie up, and it really cinches in your waist and it just looks gorgeous. I can't wait to wear this piece too. Very excitingly and very generously, Simple Retro have offered to give you all a 10% discount. So if you type in Ahya10 at the checkout, you'll be able to get 10% off your order. And so thank you so much to Simple Retro for sending me these pieces once again, and let's get into the video now. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a true seasonal reader. I love to read according to the different seasons, and my Notion library is categorized. There's a separate category for the different seasons that each book is set in, and so I was so excited to film this spring inspired book recommendations video. I love cottagecore, and when I think of spring I think of cottagecore, and it's an aesthetic that I fell in love with a couple of years ago when it really helped me to embrace the different floral patterns and long flowy dresses, and spending time in nature and appreciating God's creation. I've come up with a list of 22 books for you all today, and I tried to shrink it down so that it wasn't too much, but I just couldn't, I couldn't take out any of these books, and so 22 books it is. I've separated these books into 6 different categories, and so we have middle grade classics, whimsical middle grade books, herbal apothecary, florist and tea room settings, regency inspired romance books, quiet and contemplative books about life, and finally picture books, graphic novels and manga. The very first book that I have for you all is The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. The Wind in the Willows is one of my all-time favourite classics and one of my favourite children's novels in general, but this follows 4 different fun animals who all speak, and we follow Rat, Mole, Badger and Mr. Toad, and they go on really a bit of an adventure, and it takes place during all the different seasons across the River Thames, and it's such a delightful, charming, witty book with some beautiful lyrical prose. I think what makes it such a wonderful springtime read and cottagecore book is just how lyrical the nature writing in this book is. Kenneth Grahame does such an excellent job of capturing the different sounds of nature, the different landscapes in nature, and it just really brings to life this wonderful freshness and sense of living, truly living in surrounded by nature. And so I highly recommend this book if you haven't already given it a try. Next up we have, of course, Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. This is probably no surprise to anyone who's clicked on this video, and most of you have probably already given this a shot and probably loved it as well. But I wanted to include it in this video because it wouldn't be complete without Anne of Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables takes place on Prince Edward Island in Canada, and we follow Anne Shirley, who is an 11-year-old orphan. She has bright red hair, and she is adopted by the Cuthberts, who initially wanted a boy, and so there's a sort of miscommunication there, but she arrives and she completely wins over the hearts of Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, and this is such an enchanting tale. Anne is possibly one of my favourite characters of all time. She has such personality, and Ellen Montgomery did such a wonderful job of bringing her childish wonder and dreams and vivid imagination to life in Anne. This book is filled with gorgeous writing about nature and depicting sort of farm life on Prince Edward Island and the wonderful vegetation, the landscapes there. So highly recommend it if you haven't already read this book as well. Now this next book is another Ella Montgomery novel, but it's one of her only adult novels, and so this is The Blue Castle, and it features a 29-year-old lady called Valancy Sterling. Valancy is not married, and she has therefore sort of been stuck her whole life in a very controlling and dominating family with some big personalities, and so she's usually been a bit of a dormouse, you know. She doesn't really speak up for herself, and so she's kept quiet all this time. She doesn't really express her feelings and what she's really thinking and what she really wants, and so has sort of been trampled by her the bigger personalities in her life. In this story, her only refuge are the works of John Foster's novels and this dream place that she's sort of conceived of ever since she was a child called the Blue Castle, where her dreams and imaginations come to life. So when she's diagnosed with a terminal illness, Valancy decides that this is the moment where she's going to take control of her life a little and step outside her comfort zone and be brave. And it's all about her on her personal journey, but also a romantic journey as she falls in love with a man called Barney. And so, yes, it's a very charming story. It's just as whimsical and filled with luscious descriptions of nature as you would expect from a Ella Montgomery novel. I do highly recommend reading this in May because it starts on a rainy afternoon in May. Okay, the next category is still within middle grade, but books with a bit of fantasy, a bit more speculative. So first up we have By Ash, Oak and Thorn by Melissa Harrison, and I featured this book in my Bath shopping vlog because that's where I picked it up, and I have now read it and I can confirm that this is the perfect spring book to read. This features Moss, Burnett and Cumulus, who are what they call the hidden folk. They're very small little people who have lived for centuries and centuries looking after gardens and tending to different ponds and lakes and streams. The three of them live together under an ash tree, and when that ash tree is destroyed, they are sort of forced to go on an adventure to discover if there are any more hidden folk out there in the world. But on top of that, they have discovered that a couple of them have been experiencing a very strange phenomena where parts of their body are turning invisible, and so there's a sort of quest element, a cozy mystery element to see what's happening there as well. This book takes place on a March springish kind of day, and so it's really such a delightful book to pick up this season. Melissa Harrison does an excellent job of portraying the beauty of nature and how humans have been very disruptive to nature the last couple of centuries, and so I really highly recommend this if you want a little bit of fantasy, a cozy mystery, beautiful descriptions of nature, and also stunning illustrations inside as well. As a fan of Studio Ghibli, I couldn't not include Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. If you love the movie as much as I do, then I will preface that this book is very different from the movie, but it's also very interesting to see how Hayao Miyazaki was inspired by Diana Wynne Jones's original text. This takes place in the land of Ingri, where we follow a girl called Sophie, and Sophie works in a hat shop. Unfortunately, one day she comes across the Witch of the Waste, who is a very unpleasant customer and ends up putting a curse on Sophie where it makes her age, and so she is in the body of her grandma. And so Sophie sets off on a journey trying to get some help, and she's determined to get rid of the curse and she goes to the only place she knows where to find some help, which is the dreaded wizard house moving castle on the hills. And so we see them get closer together, we see them going on multiple different sort of portal world-like journeys across different realms, with some really fun cast of characters. This is a very fun, whimsical read to read during spring, and I highly recommend it if you do love the film to give this a shot and to see, like make a little comparison to see which one you prefer. And the next book in this category is Glow Rushes by Roberto Piumini, and it's translated from the Italian by Leah Genexo. This book is written in Italian, but it takes place in Turkey, and we follow a man who has been painting all his life. He's a very incredible and well-known and beloved painter. One day he receives a very particular commission, a very strange commission request from a very wealthy man in the region who asks him to come and live with him for months, essentially, to paint these wonderful nature scenes for his son. The wealthy man's son has a very rare condition, is very debilitating. He can't go outside at all. He is absolutely forbidden by doctors from seeing any sort of natural light or the natural world in general, and so he's stuck in his room all his life. And so his father has commissioned this painter to be able to show what life is really like and the beauty of life through his paintbrushes. It's a very, very short tale, but it's filled with such heartwarming friendship between this painter and this little boy. And we see them get closer together through art, through the depiction of the world in art form, and it has some incredible quotes and meaningful moments. And so I do really highly recommend this book for anybody who wants to read a very almost melancholy but very beautifully written story. When I think about cottagecore, I think about long floral dresses and picnic baskets and little hampers, but I also think about herbal remedies and the natural world and flower shops. And so this next category is really all about books that are set in one of these settings. The first book I have is Eva Evergreen Semi-Magical Witch by Julia Abe, and this cover also is so beautiful. Can you tell I'm drawn to beautiful covers? This book follows a little girl called Eva Evergreen, and before she turns 13, she really desperately wants to earn the ranking of novice witch, because if she turns 13 and she still hasn't got this rank, she will lose all her magical powers forever. The problem is Eva has hardly any magical abilities, and the little that she does, often things go wrong. And so Eva is given a set of different tasks to achieve, and one of them is to visit a new town and to help that town in some sort of way. So she sets off on a journey and she lands in a coastal town called Ottery. Eva ends up opening a magical repair shop accompanied by her companion Ember, but when a huge storm threatens Ottery and its residents, Eva, with her limited magical abilities, must try to help the town. The reason why I put this book in this category at all is because it features such delicious descriptions of baked goods and pastries and sweets, and oh my gosh, this book makes you so hungry. I feel like a bakery and baked goods always makes me feel really cozy, and so I wanted to include it here. Next up is Green Wild, The World Behind the Door by Parry Thompson, and it's illustrated by a fellow Astound agency artist called Elisa Paganelli, and her illustrations in this book are literally so incredible. This book, I featured it in my winter recommendations because it starts off in December, I think. but it's really such a great read for spring too. Daisy Thistledown is on a bit of a run from her boarding school, and she escapes her boarding school to try and find her missing mum. Along the way, she ends up falling into a portal world which takes her from Kew Gardens into the Green Wild, which is a place where botanists and plant lovers come together and they create magical things using green magic, which is magic from plants and flowers and trees and shrubs, etc. So this book is really delightful to read during spring. If you love magical schools, you might really love this one because it has all those wonderful descriptions of different modules that she's learning or different classes that she has to take as she tries to get a better understanding of green magic and the history behind Green Wild. She also has some wonderfully charming classmates that she becomes good friends with, and she studies green magic with them. So if you love magical schools, love plants and the idea of magic using plants, then maybe this is a good one to check out. Next up is a book that was marketed as a cottagecore fantasy romance, and so I have to include it in this video. This is Flower Heart by Catherine Bakewell. I read this last year and I fell in love with this book. I personally gave it 5 stars because I was just having a really good time, but I know that several people who are reading it at the same time as me were a little bit disappointed because they wanted a bit more. This is YA, and so maybe if you're looking for like real depth, this book might not have it, but it is a wonderful time, light-hearted read if that's what you're looking for this spring. This book follows a girl called Clara, and Clara's magic with flowers has always been a little bit unpredictable, a bit more wild, and she's always struggled to control it, but it's never been dangerous until one day she accidentally poisons her dad with flowers, and so she has to try and find a remedy for him as soon as possible. Now, the only person who she finds is willing to help her is a boy called Xavier, and Xavier is or was a former friend of Clara's, but they grew apart as they got older, and so this is a little bit of a second chance. Is it second chance? It's really like old friends to now lovers sort of romance. It's got all the cottagecore that you might want. It's got flower magic, flower languages, and using flowers to represent different things and different meanings behind it. It's also got like wonderful apothecary settings and loads of descriptions of floral fields and flower fields that really reminded me of, you know, that scene in Howl's Moving Castle in the movie version where there is just a beautiful landscape filled with pink and yellow flowers. And so this book is a wonderful spring read. The 4th book in this category is A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin. I read this book twice now, and I actually ended up DNFing the 2nd book in this duology. I don't know if I wasn't in the right headspace or I just wasn't enjoying the story as much, but I definitely really like and enjoy the 1st book anyways. Our main protagonist in this book is a girl called Ning, and she accidentally, unknowingly brewed a very poisonous tea for her mum, and her mum ends up dying from this as a consequence. So when Ning hears of a new competition hosted by the Royal Imperial Palace, she enters this competition to be hopefully picked as the winner and a Royal Shunong Show, which is a master of ancient tea making. The reason why she wants to enter is because the palace have promised that the winner will be granted one request from the princess. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of court drama, and she ends up making friends with a very mysterious boy who you understand a little bit more about why he's there as the book progresses, and so there's a little bit of romance in this book too. It gives all the vibes of magical tea and tea brewing and a royal competition. It's set in a Chinese inspired setting, or an ancient Chinese inspired setting, so this is a wonderful fantasy read. This next book that I have for you all is a book that some of you might not have heard of before, and it's Midsummer's Mayhem by Rajni LaRocca, and this has a wonderful cover too. This book is a middle grade inspired by, or is a retelling of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, and that's one of my favourite Shakespeare plays that I studied in school. I think we studied it in year 8 or something like that. But in this story, we follow an 11-year-old girl called Mimi, and Mimi is part of a very big Indian American family as she's the youngest of 4. So she's often felt like she's gone unseen because her siblings are more well accomplished and very popular and very beautiful. So her only refuge has been baking. But there is a new bakery that opens down the street, and they are hosting a mysterious new contest that is calling for young bakers, and so Mimi decides to enter it. As she is preparing ingredients for this new baking competition, Mimi ends up being drawn to the nearby woods, and here she meets a very mysterious boy called Vic, who helps to show her all these different new herbs and ingredients and flowers that she can use as part of her baking. So this book is filled, as you can imagine, with really luscious descriptions of scrumptious food and yummy desserts as Mimi goes on a bit of a baking adventure. And I loved reading and seeing the correlations between the Shakespeare influence and this particular novel. It's very warm, very tender, and I really enjoyed this. The final book in this category is Juliet Marilia's Daughter of the Forest. I think when I read this was like my favorite read of 2022, I think. It is set in ancient Ireland and it has a lot of Celtish inspirations, and we follow a girl called Saoirse, who is the youngest of 7 siblings. She's the only daughter to 6 older brothers, and so they live a very peaceful life. She has a very loving family, and her brothers have a very close relationship, and all their lives they've been very much protected by a forested region called Seven Waters, which is sort of like their territory, and it has loads of huge ancient trees, and there's magic in the air that's protected them from outside raiders until one day their dad gets remarried to a very wicked sorceress called Lady Una. When Lady Una realizes that Saoirse is able to see through her disguise, she curses Saoirse and her brother, and so her brothers go into exile and they are all cursed to turn into swans. She ends up being exiled alongside her brothers, and she ends up on an epic journey trying to find cures and doing some really awful tasks to end up trying to save her brothers. There is a truly beautiful romance between her and another warlord, and I was rooting for them so badly the whole time. I loved this story. It's quite heavy. It is good to check trigger warnings because there are a lot of awful things that happen and very heavy topics that are discussed, but it is a really incredibly written. I mean, the number of tabs I have, like I was tabbing every single page, from the relationship between Saoirse and her brothers to the wonderful depictions of nature in ancient Ireland and the herbs and the different plants and flowers that she sort of lives off by, and her farming, and the romance in this. Oh my goodness, the romance in this. So Yes, this book was one of my favourites of 2022, and I actually want to reread it now because it's been a while. I have loved swoon-worthy romance novels and movies ever since I was a child. I've always been a bit of a hopeless romantic, and just being able to read about two people falling in love, and extra bonus points if it's a slow burn romance, oh, there's just something about it. And I think Regency inspired books in particular, which is this next category, sort of inspired by Jane Austen's novels, it really brings like a certain warmth to my heart. You know, all that faff over like lace gloves and will they, won't they, and going to tailors to get custom dresses made for the season. Oh, it's just so delightful, and I love it so much, and I buy into it every single time. This first book in this category is a YA fiction novel that I featured in my early spring book haul and unboxing video, and it caught a lot of your eyes as well, which I'm really happy about. And it's Yours from the Tower by Sally Nichols. This book follows three young girls who are 18 and freshly out of school, and they were best friends when they attended school together, but because they were at boarding school, all three of them actually come from very far off different places across the UK. And so you've got one girl in Scotland, another one in London, and another one in Liverpool or Manchester, one of those two cities. And it's really so charming. They're sending letters to each other as they try to keep in contact with each other, and this whole book is an epistolary novel. It's all in letters from all the different perspectives, and they're talking about their love interests, what's going on, what they've been up to. This book has some really sweet romance in it as each of the girls are finding their individual love interests, and it's very funny to read about all the different mishaps and the adventures that they go on. I really highly recommend this book if you want a very fun, light-hearted Regency set novel. Guys, this is one of my all-time favorite books, and this is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and I couldn't not include this book, even though you probably have all heard of it already. It's a Fae Regency inspired novel, and we follow a girl called Theodora Ettings, or Dora for short, and she has been cursed by a fairy when she was young, and so she only has half her soul, which means that she isn't able to really feel the same way as society says that she should. She doesn't really get offended very easily or embarrassed by anything, and so she's very outspoken. During the London season, she accompanies her cousin who is very dear to her, and the two girls end up travelling to London to find a match for her cousin. She ends up taking a stroll one day out of boredom, and she walks inside this shop where she comes across one of London's most hated man, and he is Lord Elias Wilder, and he is the king's royal sorcerer. As she spends more and more time in Elias Wilder's company in the high society, she ends up being drawn into affairs with the Fae and fairies. It's actually a bit of a cozy mystery because her and Elias are trying to discover or uncover some very awful things that are happening in London. So we see her stepping inside the Fae world, we see her in high society, in balls and wearing dresses and gowns for the balls. So the romance in this and the setting and the banter and the wittiness between the wit between Elias and Dora, it just makes us such an enjoyable read. Now this next book, I don't own a physical copy, but it's on my Amazon wish list. It's called Miss Newbury's List by Megan Walker, and I read this a couple of weeks ago and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's another Regency-inspired historical fiction novel with the most incredible, heartwarming, clean, swoon-worthy romance ever. So it's set in the 19th century and we follow a woman called Rosalind Newbury, who is now engaged to be married to a duke, and she doesn't love the duke and the duke doesn't love her, but they have a very cordial mutual understanding that they're doing this for the greater good. Essentially, he wants the bit of land that her family owns and she's doing it so that she can earn a title for her family and for her younger brothers. But Rosalind had a list that she came up with a couple of years ago when she was younger, and it's a list of 10 things that she wants to accomplish before she gets married or before her wedding date. And so she ends up trying to tick off every single one, and along the way she comes across her best friend's cousin, and he's called Charlie and he doesn't have a very great reputation. We end up seeing them two as they overcome their respective prejudices, and they have the most beautiful, swoon-worthy romantic relationship, and it's such a good read. Now this next book is one that I've mentioned before and I've raved about how much I loved it, but it's A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting by Sophie Irwin. This is a duology, and both the first book and the second one is incredible, so I recommend you looking into the second one as well if you're interested. This book is again set in the high society of Regency England, and we follow a girl called Kitty Talbot, and Kitty ends up traveling all the way to London during the season to find somebody who is very wealthy enough to be able to provide not only for her but all for her many younger sisters as well. Kitty ends up not really caring about love match, not really caring about who she ends up entrapping and faking a marriage with. She just wants somebody who is wealthy enough to provide for her and her family. Unfortunately for Kitty, the one man who seems to be able to see through her facade and her intentions is Lord Radcliffe, and so Kitty, who was initially planning on trying to marry Lord Radcliffe's younger brother, has a bit of a rival situation going on, a bit of competition and enemies to lover situation going on with Lord Radcliffe, and so their banter, their rivalry is so entertaining to read about, and I really do recommend this book if you want something charming and full of life and full of humour. This next category I've titled quiet and contemplative books about life, and the reason I included this in the video was because I feel like from wind to spring is quite a big transition, and it always makes me want to crave books that are very reflective and, you know, the quiet musings and ponderings on life. Spring is such a season for the renewal of hope, and so I always find myself drawn to these more quiet and cozy, thoughtful books. So I have 3 to share with you all today. First up, I have Sweet Bean Paste by Julian Sukegawa, and it's translated by Alison Watts into English from the Japanese. And this is a very quiet novel following a man called Sentaro, and Sentaro has, by society's measures, failed. He has a criminal record. His dreams of becoming a writer doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. He ends up spending his days dwindling time away in a confectionery shop where he sells dorayaki, which is a type of pancake made using sweet bean paste. One day, Tokue, who is an elderly grandmother, ends up coming to the shop and she volunteers to work at the shop. She really begs him to be allowed to work at the shop on really little pay, and she has disfigured hands, which makes Sentaro very hesitant to hire her at first, but she makes the most incredible sweet bean paste, and so he ends up hiring her. And it's a very quiet story about overcoming loneliness, about friendship, and finding friendship in unexpected places. It's about social prejudice and the social situation in Japan, in contemporary Japan. And so it's a very heartwarming tale. It's very cozy, very has a very reflective atmosphere to it. And the reason why I included this for the spring recommendations is because, as you can tell from the cover, this book very much centers around cherry blossom trees. As time passes and as the cherry trees bloom and fade and bloom and fade, we see Tokue and Sentaro getting closer, sharing deeper things about things that have troubled them in their lives. And I really enjoyed this book, and I'm currently in the middle of rereading it. The next book in this category is Welcome to the Hyunandong Bookshop by Hwang Bodum, and it's translated from the Korean by Shanna Tan. I have clearly loved this book. I clearly love this book, and I have talked about it previously in one of my videos, and there I shared just how much I enjoyed this story. It follows a once high-flying career lady called Youngju, and Youngju did everything that she was supposed to do, or at least was expected of her to do according to society, and she ends up becoming really burnt out, and she quits her job, and she ends up wanting to open up a bookshop. So she finds a very quaint and quiet village in the middle of the Seoul neighborhood, and it's called Hyunamdong, and this is where she opens up her very first bookshop. Sorry guys if the camera angle or the lighting has changed, it's because my phone ran out of storage, and so I spent, I think, about like an hour just going through all the footage and sorting all of that out. So now that's done, we can carry on talking about books. The reason why I put this book in this video is because even though it isn't necessarily a book set during spring, it often has that hopeful atmosphere about it. It's very calming to read about, that sense of renewal and a renewed sense of purpose and coming together in friendship and as a community. It's really what this book is all about. So I think it's a lovely one to take your time with in spring when the weather is warming up and the days are getting a little bit longer. The third book in this category is A Cup of Sake Beneath the Cherry Trees by Kenko, and this is number 11 in the Penguin Little Black Classics series. This book is super short, and it's a non-fiction selection of sayings and thoughts of a medieval Japanese monk. And he talks a lot about life and a lot of existential stuff actually, and he talks a lot about the fleeting nature of life and how the transitory nature of life and the existence of death makes life all the more beautiful and all the more precious. As a Christian, there were a couple of things that I obviously didn't agree with, since there's a lot of speculation on Buddhist philosophy, but I think on the whole, the meaning and the message that Kenko tries to draw upon is really quite profound, and I really found myself agreeing to a lot of the things that he exposed upon. And of course the title itself is very spring appropriate, so I do really highly recommend this one if you're looking for a very philosophical, quite reflective piece, and really short one as well to go through. Maybe if you yourself are sitting beneath the cherry trees. Last but not least, we have the picture book, graphic novel and manga section of the video, and I wanted to include this because, you know, as a kidlit artist, I always am so drawn to beautiful art that accompanies a wonderful message, a wonderful written story. So I have one picture book, one graphic novel and one manga book to show you all. This first book is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Of course, this book is based on the classic, but it's retold by Geraldine McCaughrean and illustrated by Margarita Cook Tina. And I have been a huge fan of Margarita's illustrations, and I've been following her incredible art for a couple of years now on Instagram. And so when I found out that she was going to be releasing this book, I had to buy it from the Waterstones that is local to me. I've never actually read The Secret Garden. I've tried to read it a couple of times over the last few years, but I couldn't get through it for some reason, and so this year I'm going to really try hard to make sure I finish that classic. I'm sure I'll love it. But once I finish that, I want to go through this picture book and see how Margarita's illustrations brings a story to life. Our penultimate book is a graphic novel that I discovered when I first got into graphic novels a couple of years ago, and it's called The Sprite and the Gardener, and it's by Ree Abrego and Joe Witt. This graphic novel is so perfect if you're a spring lover or a cottagecore enthusiast as well. The story is actually a little bit like by Ash Oakenthorne, because in this world there were sprites long ago who would take care of gardens and the wild nature all around us. And so they would take care of the flowers and the plants and the shrubs. But as time passed and as humans developed towns and created their own meticulous lawns and gardens, there were no more need of sprite in the wild world. However, a young sprite called Wisteria ends up stumbling into a garden that is very unloved and not taken care of, and so Wisteria ends up trying to help the human person who owns this garden by breathing magic into the flowers and plants. So a relationship blossoms between them two, and you see how humans and the sprites work side by side to create a blossoming, beautiful garden again. Last but not least, we have Snow White with the Red Hair by Sorata Akitsuki. This is a manga series that I fell in love with, and I actually ended up watching the anime too, although I haven't finished the anime, but I did watch a couple of episodes, and that is beautiful if you want a cozy cottagecore inspired story. This manga takes place in a world where Shirayuki, who is our main protagonist, she has unusually bright red hair, and this news has reached the Prince of Tambaran, who wants her for himself, and so she ends up trying to escape to a nearby woods, and along the way she crosses paths with 3 different people, one of them being Prince Zen of a neighbouring kingdom, and so they all couple up and they end up travelling to where Zen is from for Shirayuki's safety. The reason why I said this was a cottagecore manga series is because it's set in a fantasy world where Shirayuki is a herbalist, and she brews medical herbs and potions and tinctures for the different villages, and so when she reaches the neighbouring kingdom she ends up applying to be a royal herbalist for the royal family. So I really recommend this book if you're wanting a light-hearted fantasy read with some really adorable and sweet romance. Okay, I think that's the end of this video. Thank you so so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this cottagecore and spring themed video. Don't forget to check out Simple Retro and use Ahya 10 for your 10% off. I can't wait to style all of these different pieces of clothing. Thank you so much for watching, friends, and I hope you have a wonderful start to your spring. Bye, friends!